With the release of 3.7.4, we've brought in 9 major functionality changes that will have some sort of impact on your business. Firstly, we've brought in resource management. So we've sort of upgraded the overall look and appearance of the resource management page. So what that means is we can now have the ability to replace, remove resources. We can change direct supervisors, propagate resources from one location to a variety of other locations. In the roster page, we've now added little shortcut buttons to sort of minimize the amount of clicks that's needed per roster page. We've now brought in the ability to also clone rosters. Basically what that is you select a target period for your roster that you've set up basically how you want it in the future, and you can now simply repeat that into the future. With leave management, we now have the ability to split shifts. So what that means is if you call in sick midway through a shift, you start feeling ill, and you ask for a leave request, the shift or the action itself will be split up. So the remainder will be given to a different resource, while the first period that you've worked will be paid as leave. So the remaining will be paid as leave. Leave requests submitted by service managers, so level 3, will automatically be approved. When changing from part-time and full-time to casuals, you're given a small little pop-up. We can relax user permissions to allow all level 2 and 3 in a location to approve leave. Leave shift is now based off the allocated work and or the leave loading pattern location. We've now put in max hours reinforcements for resources, and there's a way to reinforce that to ensure that if they are overtime, they will not be selected at all in the optimization list. We have the ability now to amend allowances for house rosters that have already been created. When adding ad hoc leave shifts on the timesheet approval, you can now select the location where that shift will be connected to. With group activities, we've had a large revampment in this area. You can now amend group activity participant times for both resources and clients. You can add unique session descriptions for group activities themselves and for recurring group activities in the future. And account statements, we sort of redesigned it to fit in to have a better appearance when printing and the overall appearance of it. You can now cancel credits when they were previously added. The client portal has had an improvement on what the client can see and the overall look of it, and TTP in general has become more user-friendly. Okay. So the first section we'll discuss is the new organizational chart. So in 3.7.3, we had these red, blue, and green people that sort of displayed the levels within the system. We've now revamped it to firstly appear as these small little rectangles with the description of the person, the name, and it has the similar workflow where the system still only supports 3 levels of VisiCase. Previously in 3.7.3, you'd have to first add the resource and then give them a position. In 3.7.4, we now have to first create the position and then fill it in with an existing resource or a new resource. When creating a new location within VisiCase, you're now automatically prompted to this default position, which will be your service manager or CEO. From this, you can then edit it, add in whichever resource you wish, be it new or existing resource. And then by pressing the blue buttons underneath, the add buttons, they'll expand and create the list, your hierarchy within a team as you wish. So in this case, I was given this default position. I've created 2 team leaders, and underneath that team leader, I've created 1 service or support worker. In the organizational chart, you have the ability to add a new resource as well, as I mentioned. You can add the position, so in this case, it's the supervisor, with any position title you wish. And then you're given 3 options. You can add the new resource, you can select from an existing resource list, or you can decide to do it later and mainly work on creating the hierarchy within that location. So if we were to go in and edit one of these resources that we've created, the options we're given is to change the position title, to allow this resource to add new participants, allow to add new actions for mobile, and the option to replace this resource. I'll go into further detail for this later on. When editing a position, we're given 6 possible options for a service worker, support worker. In this case, we can replace a resource, we can remove the resource from this location, we can remove the position, we can change the direct supervisor, and we can propagate the role to another location. For replacing a resource, you have 2 options. If you wish to replace with a new resource, you simply tick the new resource option, fill in the details that you need, similar to how it was previously. So it's first name, last name, an email, and some general permissions this resource will have, and then validate. If it's an existing resource, you can search by name. It'll search phonetically and similarly as well. And similar options to before, you can allow to add new clients, allow to add new actions for mobile, in the ID for agency reports. If you choose to replace a resource, you select if you select an existing resource, the system will run through a validation check to ensure that if there is any allocated items, that this new person can be allocated to ensure that permissions are the same. And depending on the item's types and status, they will automatically be transferred over to this new person taking this role. If you're trying to replace a resource that has their contract location in this specific location, the system won't allow you that, since all resources within the system have to have a contract location. If you're planning to remove a resource, if the resource doesn't have a team, the system will ask you whom to allocate all these items to. If the resource does have a team, it will also ask you who the team replacement is. Both these will run through a validation and similarly check how we previously did, if this person has any work underneath them, if this new person can be allocated, and permissions and validation surrounding that. As mentioned, if you remove the resource, it will do a similar validation. It will check if items can be transferred across, what status they're in, and it will stop this whole procedure if the removing resource location is their contract location. If you wish to remove the position and not remove the position removes both the resource and the position itself from the location. Previously, it was just the resource. Now it's the position and the resource. So similarly, it will check if you have a team or you don't have a team. It'll run through a similar validation. Validate and ensure everything can be moved across for the team and the team members. If you wish to edit a resource by moving them across vertically, so you can move a whole team to a new supervisor, you can move a support worker to a different team. From this, you just select from the drop-down list a resource in this current location. So with move team, you can only move in this current location. There aren't any validations required here, since this resource still is in the same location, and they're only moving horizontally in the teams. They can't move vertically from this area. If they're changing direct supervisors, they will have to select it from this menu, from change direct supervisors, and from here they'll select from a drop-down list, similarly validate, and then allocate the new direct supervisor. And propagating from one location to the another location is the last option you have on this menu. You will select from a drop-down list who will be the new manager of this person in the new location. Select from the drop-down list and simply propagate. If there are any items in the new location that the resource will see, or with any of these changes, on the next slide I'll explain how this procedure works, because previously there were some times where you couldn't see buttons, the buttons are missing. All that will be explained in the next slide. And lastly, with all these changes, so after items are replaced or reallocated within the system still needs to update the to-do list. It doesn't do it automatically. Some buttons may be missing, as you previously may have noticed. So the items are refreshed in the following order. So any case files or items, in this case actions, quick charges, house shifts, incident reports, that have a due date within the next 24 hours, those will automatically be transferred across immediately. If there are more than 300 items, the system will prioritize anything due in the next 24 hours. It will then put a queue in for 11 p.m. on that day, and then transfer the rest at that time. So if you do the transfer early in the morning and 24-hour passes, by the same time tomorrow, all items should be transferred across to the new person with the appropriate buttons visible. I'll quickly hop into the system now and show you how all this looks like in a live system. Okay. So here I've logged into our demo system, and if we head into our subscription admin and location menu, we'll pick up any location and resources. So here we can see that the organizational chart I explained previously, we have these plus buttons here that allow us to create certain options. If we were to select this plus button here under the service manager, this would create a new team leader position. In this case, supervisor. We can give any name we wish. This title is then later used for reporting reasons within the whole system. We have the option to add a new resource, select from existing list, or add it later. In this case, I'll leave it as add later, and I'll add the supervisor. Here we can see this additional position was created with just the position title of VisiCase leader and no name attached to it. If we, at a later date, we want it to come in, we can simply click on it and we can fill in the role now. By pressing any of these blue buttons below, similar to the green, so these green pluses, it will create service workers in that team. So in this case, support worker 1. I'll add the service worker, and we can see now that our hierarchy is starting to expand. We now have a team leader and a service worker. If we wanted to add someone else into Sandra Smith's team, similarly, we can just click the plus button, create the position first. It can be, once again, a new resource or an existing resource. We can search for them within the system. Double click, no, and add service worker. Here we can see Alicia Keys is now part of Sandra Smith's team. Let's say, per se, we want Alicia to be replaced with a different resource. So in this case, maybe Alicia has left and we want the position to remain there, but we wish for a new resource to work on this position. We can simply replace the resource. Once again, we have the two options. We'll say it's an existing resource. We search and we'll add Diego. No and no. Validate. So this will check if this person has any work. We'll process. And now the system will replace Alicia with Diego. We can see now Diego is here, Alicia has been removed, but the position remains. If we wish to remove the resource, we don't yet know who is going to take this resource's place. We can remove the resource from this position and simply process it. We can see that since Diego has been replaced, no jobs or activities have been given to him, so there's no validation needed. And we can simply process. This will remove Diego, but the position remains. Head over to Arthur now. In Arthur's case, if we were to remove the position, firstly we can see that we cannot do it since this is employment contract location. The same is said for resource. In this case, we'll have to first change his employment contract location, then we can hop in and do what we need to this resource. And in this case, I'll jump over to Kurt Miller. So in Kurt's case, we're given the option to remove positions since this location isn't his contract location. We'll select who will be allocated / coordinating Kurt Miller's assignment. In this case, we'll select Arthur. We'll validate. The system will check what's being withdrawn, what's being reallocated, what's being replaced. In this case, all these participations will be automatically withdrawn. So any group activities, actions, or house shifts, those will automatically have the resource withdrawn. Items that will be reallocated can be case files, case plans, incident reports. All those can be reallocated. In this case, I'll process. So these 4 activities have now been removed for Kurt, and now we can see both his position and the resource himself is gone. With Mary, we can change direct supervisors. So in this case, they're currently under Ivona leader, but we'll put this resource now under Simon. We'll validate. No items needed for validation. We'll process. Now we'll see Mary Stone has moved from Ivona and is now part of Simon's team. And the last option we have that I described was Propagate's role to other location. In this instance, by clicking it, the system will check quickly in the background if this resource is in any other locations. In this case, this person already exists in disability services, so we cannot add this person here. In the other 2 locations, there are not any supervisors set up. So in this case, we'll add this resource to a team leader here, and a team leader here. So a service worker, a support worker, a level 3 person can only always be propagated to another person with the same direct supervisor. So in that case, you can't have a support worker be propagated to be a team leader in a different role automatically through this. They'll first have to be propagated to a support worker in the new location, and from there they can move vertically up to become a team leader. In this case, these 3 locations will propagate. And now if we were to head into those 3 locations, we'll have Mary in those new 3 locations. And that's how this new organizational chart works. Before I jump into the next section, do we have any questions?
I have a question, Tudor.
Yes.
When we change the resource from this particular screen,
yes.
So for example, if I'm taking Surjit out from one location and replacing that particular position with Kwangli, for example,
yep.
What will happen to the pending transactions that require Surjit's action before I take Surjit out? Those pending transactions could be incident reports that are waiting for Surjit to action, or timesheets that Sergey was supposed to put in, but he did not, or any pending transactions, what's going to happen to them?
So are you replacing or are you removing the
Yep,
resource?
I'm leaving the position open,
Yep.
but replacing a resource
Yep.
within that position.
So with incident reports, they will remain with Subjit once you remove him, but the pending approvals will be now passed on to the new person that you assigned to this role.
Okay.
Um,
So because as soon as I take Sergey out from this location, he will lose access to this location, right?
yes,
And to the case files in this
yes.
location.
He'll,
So how will he be able to manage incident reports if he's not a part of that team anymore?
so incident reports are hooked differently underneath than differently to case plans and case files. So once Subjit has lost his access to this location, incident reports will remain with him since he was the person who actioned them initially or who has the greatest insight on them. So we believe that even if they're removed from the location, he has the best, I guess, overview of what actually happened with that incident report. So in that case, the incident report will remain with him.
Okay. And any other workflow within the system, timesheet approvals, for example, or anything apart from incident reports, will stick to the position.
No, incident reports are the only ones that will remain with him. Everything else, we can send a validation through, but everything else will remain with that position, either withdrawn or reallocated to the new resource.
Okay, thanks, mate.
No worries. To answer Melanie's question that I saw, how do you move someone from level 1 to level 2? For that instance, you'll have to remove the resource and you have to re-add him into level 2. Because there's a whole...
Dude, just
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry, just a follow-up question on the earlier question.
Yes.
So how do you assign the incident reports to the new person? Because if you remove them, they'll get linked. They are still linked with the old person, but how do you assign them to the new person?
You have the capacity to reallocate incident reports. So in that case, you'll have to reallocate the incident reports to the new person.
Would you have to do them individually, or changing the position altogether will assign all them?
Individually.
Okay.
As I mentioned previously, we believe that the person that was initially assigned to them has the best information about them. Yep. Okay. So if that's if removing staff from position. Yeah, so to answer Kathleen's question, if you remove a staff from position or replace that staff member, all the staff members' details are still saved within the system. So when you recall them next time, for example, any contact details, all those items will remain with the client itself, or with the resource itself. Okay, I'm a bit conscious of time, so I'll jump on to the next slide. Perfect. So roster management. Roster management was another big thing we tackled in this release, and as I mentioned at the beginning, cloning roster was a large one. So how cloning roster works, it's a functionality that focuses on the ability to clone a period of roster into a compatible future period. So what I mean by that is if you've set up the perfect fortnight this fortnight, and you wish to copy this fortnight and just paste it in the future, you can now do that in bulk for shifts and actions. The system will run through all the validations as per normal, but now it can be cloned in the future. So to clone a roster, there are 3 steps to consider. The first one is you have to define what and where to clone. So in that case, if it's a shift, an action, and where as in which location you are copying. Which period type, so is it a fortnightly copy you want to do or a weekly copy? And define when to copy. So the source period is the period that you've set up and you're happy with, and the target period is from what point onwards would you like this cloning to happen. I've provided a bit more details here on this page that will be sent out with the slide, with the PowerPoint itself. But generally it's type, it's service delivery location, the period type, source period, the target period, display, which I'll explain further down in the list, and if you are copying via actions, participants as well. So here's a quick example. So if your source period is before the current pay cycle, if we clone a shift or an action by fortnight and source period is the 8th of October to the 21st of October, and your current pay cycle is the 22nd of October till the 4th of November, the earliest target period will be the next fortnight after the current pay cycle. And the second example that I explained before I hop into it is the source period is a future period. So if we clone a shift or an action by fortnight and the source period is from the 5th of November to the 18th of November, the period is a future fortnight, as the current pay cycle previously mentioned is from the 22nd to the 4th. The earliest target period will need to be the fortnight after the source period. So just a quick reiteration of that is if we're in our current fortnight period and we wish to copy something we previously did in the before previous pay cycle, that is something we can do. If our target period, the one we're happy with, is in the future, we can copy it backwards and then forwards. This will become a lot more clear when I show you the steps. So there are two options that I mentioned for filters. You can view by calendars, which will show you fortnightly periods. In my opinion, this is best to do when you're doing 1 week of cloning. If you're doing it by a list, it will give you the option to, it's kind of unclear now, but select and deselect which actions or shifts you wish to recur. So in this case, it's fairly small, but there's 4 rows here, sorry. So this roster is being cloned 4 fortnights in the future. In the list view, we have the option to select one of them to not be cloned and the rest to be cloned, or 2 and 2, so forth. In the calendar view, we can only select for the whole cloning of a particular shift or action to clone or not to clone. That's the main difference between the two. Once again, I'll show you in better detail once I get there. A workflow that we've implemented with cloning a shift is that if today was the last shift for a recurring shift and you clone it from today onwards, all the clones of this shift session will automatically be hooked under that shift group and essentially extend or amend the recurrency for that house shift. So for audit purposes, it will always be hooked underneath a shift group. The system will give you an icon or notification that this is happening prior to you confirming the cloning to occur. So this is, once again, what I just mentioned. Cloning a single shift session will make it recurring and label it as recurring. Any recurring shift sessions will be hooked or linked to the source session, and the recurring shifts are updated with the new recur until. So when cloning a shift, there is a list of validations the system goes through. For shifts, it's slightly shorter since there aren't as many, they're not connected to a client. With shifts, there are 2. First, they'll notify you if it's becoming recurring or is recurring. And the second validation is about recurrency patterns. So in the system, you have the ability to recur daily, weekly, fortnightly, and monthly. Broken recurrency refers to if you have an activity occur every month and you wish to clone for, say, every week. We're using this cloning roster functionality, and per circumstance, that 1 month action that's recurring will now recur every week since we're cloning this every week, and the system will notify you saying that the recurrency has broken. It's no longer monthly, for this cloning period, it is occurring every week. And both in calendar view and in list view, it will notify you saying that the recurrency pattern has broken. When cloning in action, you have the option to clone specifically for a participant or all participants within a location. These are the additional action validations the system goes through for cloning. So it will check if the case file is now exited. It will check if it is outside of funding dates. Once again, it will check if it's outside recurrency pattern. And it will also check if the participant has any overlapping activities. A similar validation also happens for resources in both shift cloning and action cloning. As some of you may already know, in the system there already exists a cloning functionality, and that's specifically for actions. So on this page, I've sort of outlined the main similarity and differences between the two. So just to overview, for actions, the difference is that it occurs purely for actions and for one action at a time. It will clone a specific action into the future. For a roster, it clones all available actions for that fortnight or week, whichever you've selected, and copy those into the future for as long as you've selected. An additional functionality associated with this roster management is these quick access buttons. So now on the roster view page, you will see these three additional buttons, three additional lines that once clicked will show the resource that clicked it, all available options they have based off their permissions. So in this case, I've clicked on this action for Adam Malik, and I have the option to process, amend, cancel, reallocate, or withdraw. I'll quickly show you what this looks like in the system, and then I'll take questions. So within the system, I'll head to the roster page. So the roster page looks fairly similar, but now we have this new clone roster button on the side here. By clicking this, we have the previously mentioned options. So we can select what to copy. Is it shifts or actions? In this case, I'll select actions. Where is our source, our target location? In this case, I'll select the disability services location. If we want to target a specific client or participant, we can. In this case, I'll leave it blank and select all. The period type, are we copying weekly or fortnightly? I'll select fortnightly. The source period. So from what period are we taking our data and copying it? So in this case, I'll select the current period. So the 15th of March till the 28th of March. The target. So from what point onwards do we wish to copy this clone, this roster? So as mentioned in my examples, we can select from the next pay cycle, the next roster cycle forwards. So in this case, I don't have the options to select previously as I did for source period. I can only select in the future. So in this case, I'll select from the next fortnight onwards. And the number of repeats. Currently in the system, you can do it up to 5 times. However, once you've done the 5, you can then select that period and clone 5 and clone 5 and clone 5 until you've reached your desired amount. But the system currently only handles up to 5 just to ensure we don't have any timeout issues. In this case, I'll select 1 just to speed it up a bit. And we have the option to display as a calendar view and list. I'll show you both in a moment. So what I've done here is I've clicked that prepare roster. And here we're given all clients with potential actions in this period. So in this case, it's a demo system and I only have one client that has worked today. We can see that 2 have been marked in green as okay. These 2 are also recurring. The rest fall outside of funding dates that this client has set up within the system. This means that firstly, we cannot select to clone it itself. We don't have this option to. And secondly, they are automatically unticked to ensure that no mistakes happen with the funding duration. If I switch on over to list and prepare the roster again, we can see a bit more details about what actually happens in the fortnight. So in this case, we have the option to deselect one, deselect another, either or. If I were to switch to I'll select two. Similarly to how we had it in the example of the PowerPoint slide, we have additional rows that we can select that we didn't previously have in the calendar view. So we can select for this one to repeat it and this one not to be, or so forth and so on. So with list, I recommend if you're doing more than one. If you're doing just one, you can leave it in calendar view, as I believe it's easier to work with. So in this case, I'll prepare one. These, once again, cannot be selected because they're outside of funding dates. Once I'm happy with that, I will select to clone the roster. The system will now create all the work. If we can choose to allocate all the work now. So with the work, we have the option to try and allocate them all at once or apply for a specific selected period. If we did select 5 weeks, we can say maybe we wish to apply for 2 weeks only, or 4 weeks, or so on. So now what the system is doing is automatically finding all items that can be allocated, and finding the best possible match for those allocations. Give it a second. Perfect. Here we can see that one person, Peter Watson, was successfully allocated. In this other location, in this other situation, the previously working person was Peter Watson. This being the case, no resource was found in this location. So this means that we'll have to head to the roster page. We will then have to pick up the action using the new quick access buttons, and we can allocate from there to allocate this resource and fill in this action that is currently not allocated. And then if I go back to the roster page, and head to the next period, current period, and move further down. Here. We can see that this period that's in the next fortnight that I copied, you can see Peter Watson has those two items that I created for leave test, and we can see one that wasn't able to pick up anyone is sitting here and not allocated. We can hop in and simply allocate from here as per normal. Okay. Any questions about those two functionalities, about cloning and quick access buttons? So to answer Anurav's question, once the roster is cloned and there have been changes to the original roster, they will not be synced. So the point you press clone roster and you confirm it, that is what is cloned. So ideally you set up a perfect fortnight with no other changes and then clone that in the future. I understand a lot of functionalities are, well, a lot of activities and things are changing. So the idea is to set up the core that always occurs and then cloning that. Something I did forget to mention is the cloning only clones shifts and actions. It doesn't yet clone group activities since there's a lot more functionalities and validations we need to check for. Sorry, Anurav, can you please explain that? So Anurav just placed a question saying, will funding items be cloned?
Yep. So what I'm trying to say is, if we are cloning, if there is an action roster that we have cloned,
Yep.
and that action roster has NDI line items associated with the roster,
Yes, those will be cloned as
will
well.
that
Yes.
be
Yes.
cool? Thank
And with that, the system also checks if there's enough budget, and once again, if there's funding within the duration and whatnot.
you. Just answered my next question. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. I'll hop into the next section then. So we've gone through this. And next, pay cycle management. This was previously, I believe, called timesheet approval. It was released in 3.7.3. We've upgraded it to make it more user-friendly, I suppose. So what's happened here is, as mentioned, we've renamed the page. We've removed the fortnight number. You can now filter for fortnightly or weekly. You can now bulk approve timesheets. So what this button does is, instead of hopping into each individual one and pressing approve timesheet, you can now, if that button is there, when you press this, any timesheet that has everything approved, this will automatically press that approve timesheet button for you. And now you have the option to export the CSV. So you have an easy way of filtering through and finding out who's yet to be approved and who's still waiting. In the timesheet report, we've added 2 new filters. We've added a date range and the ability, when selecting pay period, you can filter now by pay period as well to get more accurate reports. So those are just more generic UI changes to the system itself. There weren't any big functionality changes there. It's just to notify you that there's a faster way of doing things now within the system. Any questions about those two parts? Perfect. I'll just quickly jump in just to show you what it looks like. So once again, you can select the pay period. You can now save your filters as well, because I know an annoying thing was by clicking on it and by approving, you'd sometimes lose your filters. You can now save your filters, and you can bulk approve your timesheets. And similarly on timesheet report, you now have the pay period. Yes, Melinda, you said you had a question. Okay, so what this bulk timesheet approval button does is, if you had the option, let's see what I'm saying. As we all know, there's a button here on the side that says timesheet approval. If you had that option there to approve the timesheet, this does it for you in bulk. So one of the validation the system checks for is if items are overlapping. Oh, sorry. So Melinda's question is, if all items are approved, but some may overlap, will the function still work? The short answer is no, since the system, this button still checks if items are overlapping and if some are waiting for approval and whatnot. So all this does is it bulk approves the timesheet button you had here. Sorry about that. Okay. Jump into the next section. So with leave management. So we've now added the functionality to enter leave midway through a shift. So what that means in this case, we had a shift from 9 to 5 p.m. for our, in this case, Adam Smith. Within the shift, he had an action from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and another action from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. Midway through, at midday, Adam called in sick. So what that looks like in the background is, for Adam's side, he now has a leave shift created from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. since this was still worked. On the back end, we now have the ability to split the shift. So in this case, from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. is a new shift that's created that can be allocated to whoever needs it. And similarly, the action can be reallocated, and as can this other action as well. This next page is a bit intense, but I'll show you on the system what it looks like. So same approval process as per normal. So this is a leave request that has been submitted. Once submitted, we have the option to withdraw the resource, and that's it. We can cancel it, or we can split the shift. As I mentioned, this page is a bit intense, but originally it was a 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. shift. 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. The original 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. is still allocated to duty. From 5 p.m. to 8:15 p.m. is no longer allocated, and now you have the option to allocate a resource from a specific location and a specific resource from that location. And similarly, you can split up the action. This last action, as per the previous explanation, it isn't being split up since it's not being affected by this leave request. It doesn't need to be split up, so it doesn't give you the option to split. I'll show this in greater detail once we hop into the system. Leave requests for service manager. Before, there was a small little issue where service managers still needed to get the leave request approved. Now they will be automatically approved since they are level 3 within the system. Leave pattern management. So now you get a pop-up message notifying you that when you're changing from a part-time to full-time, that the casual, from part-time and full-time to casual, the leave pattern is being removed and deleted. For casual to full-time, it just notifies you that you should add a leave pattern now. It's just a small little pop-up. The switch from full-time to casual will have an impact. It will delete the leave pattern behind the leave pattern. The casual to full-time will not change, will not add leave pattern for you. You'll have to go do that afterwards. New user permissions. Basically what this says is that all team leaders within a specific location now have the ability to approve a leave shift. Prior, it was only just the direct manager that can do it. Leave shift location. Previously, when adding a leave shift, it was captured based off the resource contract location. It now captures it off 2 potential options. It will prioritize if it has any allocated jobs, so any house rosters, group activities, and actions. If it doesn't have any of those and it's being based off the leave loading pattern, it'll pick up the leave loading pattern location. When adding ad hoc leave shift, there is now an additional leave shift location just to know from which, just for auditing purposes, you can now pick up which leave location this resource is being picked up from. On the buttons as well from the roster page, you can firstly adjust approved and cancel approved items. It gives you the ability to amend leave shifts that have already been leave requests that have already been created. And from this top button, you can add leave requests from here as well. I'll jump into the system and show you all those mentioned. Sorry, oops. Perfect. So firstly, I'll show you the split roster and what that looks like. So in this case, Peter Watson, I've already pre-created this leave request here. So we can see that I've created it from 3 p.m. to 11:15 p.m. And this shift occurs from 2 to 4. We can add additional leave requests from this button here. So we can hop in to any of these. It gives us the option. Once again, these are only presented if you, as the worker, as the person doing these, have access to add leave. If hypothetically you didn't have access, all these top buttons would not be visible to any other workers. Okay. One moment, sorry. Leave requests. Peter 030. Sorry, I will log out momentarily. Sorry about this. One moment, sorry. Okay. I'll just create a new leave request. Sorry about that. I will. I'll create a new leave request. So this person has work from 2 to 4. So 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. We can see the person has work. We can say sick leave, sick, validate. We can now withdraw the resource, we can cancel it, or we can split it. In this case, I will split it. I will select from where to pick up the resource. In this case, it looks like no one's available. From Disability Services, I'll pick Nat Cole to do the remainder of the work from 3 to 4. Once we're happy with that, we'll add the leave request. And the leave shift will be created for Kate, and the remainder of the shift will be given to Nat. So in this case, it can also be used when you know some workers have appointments or bookings somewhere else, and they can only do part of a shift or majority of a shift. You can now give them that leave request and split up the shift instead of needing to create two actions or two shifts themselves. With approval can now be done by, as I mentioned, team leaders within that specific location. And one last thing before I switch off this is if I head into here and pick up the resource Nat, the next format, sorry. The roster. With the leave shift, sorry for Nat, we can see that it's now connected to a location as well. I selected one format, but we can see now it's connected to a location as well. Sorry, okay. David's question is, does it give the option for both workers to do case notes? It does. So it will still require Nat to finish her work. So in this case, we saw previously this was from 2 to 4. It's now changed from 2 to 3. So it still requires Nat to fill in her case notes, the details, the timesheet details, all that. It's just what it's done here is it's split it up into 2. Basically, it's a quick split for 2 actions. Yes. So for Amanda's question is, does it also apply for groups? Yes, it does. So for groups, activities, actions, and house shifts, the split can happen now automatically. Okay, I'll head on to the next section then. So this is another small application that's been brought in 374. What it does is now on the resource skill page, we've now fixed up the resource utilization corner that sometimes I'll pause this for a second. Yvonne asked a question saying, how is the cost for service handled for split actions? It still takes into consideration, or for example, overtime and anything else when you're splitting the action. So if overtime is applied for the new resource, obviously they'll be pushed down lower on the list. But if they are still selected, overtime still occurs and whatnot. Karthika's question is, can we apply split shifts for casual workers as well? Yes, so it's a normal optimization list and allocation process. If, for example, you have a preference for casuals to appear at the top, they'll be higher up on the list. So it's the normal allocation process that occurs. It's just given in a drop-down list. Yvonne's second question, which was a link to how is cost split for actions. She asked about customer fees. I'm not too sure about that. I'll have to get back to you on that. Okay. Doesn't look like there's any other questions. So I will continue. So in the skills page, we now have these contracted hours pay period per pay period. This can be manually typed in, and this will affect, firstly, how the resource appears on the list. So if they're closer to fulfilling the contracted hours, they'll appear lower down on the utilization list. If the utilization is lower, they'll appear higher. There is also the option to enforce this max hours. By ticking this, it now becomes a hard validation, meaning that if this resource has worked over the contracted hours, it will now no longer have the ability to be selected at all. So if, in this case, in this picture here, we can see that this little tick box here, you cannot select them at all. It's a similar validation to being unavailable and having clearances expired. So these can be both done from the skills page, and I'll quickly show you what that looks like. So if you head into subscription admin and resources, if you select whichever resource it is, head to skills, and here we have contracted hours. You can type in whatever it is, 72. Oops. 72. You can change your contract location here from as well, but you can enforce maximum hours through here. Once you're happy with everything there and save it, from this point onwards, it will enforce those maximum hours. So what I mean by that is if in this current pay cycle or fortnight, this person has worked 80 hours, it will not automatically withdraw them from the extra 8 hours. From this point onwards, it will enforce the maximum. Okay. Any questions about that small little section? So Lily's question is, can contracted hours be in decimal points yet? For example, 40.5 or 37.5. For the fortnight, currently this has not been implemented. The system will give you a warning when trying to save, asking you to enter whole numbers for contracted hours. Okay. Head back into the presentation. So next, the house roster enhancements. These are a lot smaller. They were once again there just to ease the process. Oh, sorry. Melinda has a question. Yes. So Melinda's question is, if the maximum hours that can be worked is above the contracted hours, then it's best to not tick the reinforce hours button. Correct. So what this tick box is here is this maximum hours reinforces the contracted hours. It doesn't have any reference to maximum hours or whichever it is like that. It will reinforce based off this. So in house shift participations, when amending, you can now amend allowances if the shift is yet to occur. And when you amend a participation, it will run a new optimized list when allocating to ensure that people are available. When adding an ad hoc shift from the timesheet approval page, the pay cycle approval page now, sorry, you can also connect it to a shift location so you better understand the utilization for that resource for that week. Once again, fairly small section. Any questions about this? So next we'll move on to group activity enhancements. So the first major thing is for a group activity participation, we now have the option to amend both the start time and time of specific participations for both the resource and clients. So what that means is if we have a group activity participation from 10 to 4, we can now have resources, for example, start at 8 and finish at 5. Specific resources. We have specific clients shop from 9 to 3 now. It gives us the ability to, we've become more flexible with how group activities work. We now also have the option to add in unique session descriptions. So what that means is if we've recorded this group activity, we'll say the group activity is called active movers on Monday, and that's been recurring. We can say now that this coming Monday is for bushwalking. The next coming Monday is now for bowling. The next one, we give each individual one a unique description that resources can now see on their mobile when clocking in and clocking out and prior, so they understand what is coming up and what to do for this shift session. On their mobiles, they'll also see their specific time when they're meant to start. So if a resource, let's say the shift in this case starts from 10 to 4, the resource will see on their phone, if it hasn't changed, they'll see 10 to 4. But if their participation has changed, for example, it's now 9 to 3, on their mobile, they'll see 9 to 3. So whatever is allocated to them, they will see. And this can all be done from the group activity page, from this details page, this details button here, sorry. For clients, we've now given the ability to also, as mentioned, change the time, but you can now also link goals to clients from this page as well. Previously, you'd first have to create the group activity and then head to the client itself, click the group activity button and connect them with a goal. You can now automatically connect the client from here. Sorry, if I move on, David has a question. Is there a feature that would notify of changes without having to send emails or text messages? So any changes that does occur will automatically show up on the resource's mobile. However, we do have the option to send an email or a text. So any changes automatically changes. Any changes made on the desktop are automatically reflected on the mobile. But there currently isn't a way to do it that is an email or text to notify them. Since we're still a web-based app, this is both benefits and drawbacks. Benefits being we're compatible with a wider range and a lot of people can use it. The drawback is we have no direct connection to the phone itself, and for example, vibrate the phone or leave a little beep or whichever it is. Okay. Account enhancements. This refers to the client statements and account statements. We've sort of spruced up the page, made it look a lot better. We've aligned the columns, made everything fit on the page, so when you print it now, it looks a little more professional. As you can see, we've increased font size, reduced white spaces. Credit and budget includes as income on the statement page. We've added additional filters. And we've added the ability to cancel credits that have been previously added. So from the account top-up page, we can add credited funding by the client or a third party. We now have the ability to cancel those credited amounts from this page as well. So just briefly reviewing that because I ran through that. We've just spruced up the page to make it look neater and more professional. This has also affected the printing side of it, so when printing it will show those changes. And we've added the ability to cancel credited amounts that have been added. Client portal. We've updated the client portal. We've fixed a few issues that we've had with it, which expand the visibility, which shouldn't have. And we've given the ability for clients to change their passwords. So from the client portal, they have 4 sections. One is the client's general contact details and general details about the client. The client can now see their rostered activities, their quick charters, and any activities they may have, be it actions or group activities. They can see how their case plan and how their overview is progressing and how they're progressing to their expected outcomes and goals. And they can see how their funding is continuing throughout their period via the My Funding account. So in the About Me section, so that was the first one, they have the ability to edit the About Me section. However, they cannot edit their general details or contact details. That will still have to be done side by side with their case coordinator. They have the ability to print this as well and submit it anytime or cancel any changes they've previously made to this page. My plan, they'll see first any specific service lines. So in this case, 011, 01, they'll see their budgeted amount, what's been planned for them, what's been expended, how much is left available. They can see an overview of everything that's been spent. This is only in a view only mode. They won't have any buttons to add budget or anything as such. It's just to see how their funding is progressing and how it's being used while with the organization. My activities. So this is their 4th page. They'll have the view only mode. They'll see who they're working with, when they're working with them. They'll see any actions or group activities they may be connected with. For both the quick charges and the activities, they won't have any options of cancelling, amending, reallocating as you would as per normal. All they see is an overview of what is to occur, what goal it's connected to, when it's occurring, how long it's occurring for, and any other details associated to the quick charge or the activities itself. And lastly, my funding account. It has the enhancements we've made on the desktop version brought into here, and it's only a view only mode. They'll see transactions, what's happened. They have the option to filter however they wish. If they want by specific funding types, by periods, they can select fortnights. They can see a detailed view and a separation between credited and direct debited amount. They can also print this out. So that's the end of the client portal. Amanda's question is, can the client see progress notes? They cannot see progress notes. So once the action is completed, it loses visibility from their roster page, from their, I think it's called My Activities page. And once the activity has been processed, that is when the notes are left. So they don't have visibility of progress notes. I'll answer Amanda's second question first of all, sorry. It's Amanda's second question is, will the client have the ability to update contact details eventually, or is that not going to happen? Currently, we've set it up in this way since there is currently no configuration point to specifically select which clients can edit and can't edit. So we have some scenarios that we understand that some clients shouldn't have the ability to edit at all. That being the case, we've turned that off for everyone, but hopefully in the future we do have the ability to configure who can and who can't. On our previous slide about reinforcements, another question that came in, was, will the reinforce hours checkbox be automatically unchecked as the default as soon as you get 374? Yes, it will be. It will be automatically unchecked. It will be responsibility of the organizations to check in and firstly add contracted hours or adjust and tick that. Perfect. So TTP enhancements. So we all know the last few NDS updates brought in TTP, which is both a blessing and a curse. This being said, we've updated how it appears in the system. We've added an _T for services that can have the TTP rate included. It won't automatically have them included. It will still require you to have that tick box checked, but it just notifies you that these specific service lines can have the TTP checked. We've also had the ability to have TTP included within the quotation page to give more accurate quotations. And they'll now appear within management reports with an _T in the service code. This way they can be filtered easier just to see at a more definite level what is being TTP charged, what isn't being TTP charged. And lastly, quick charge enhancements. Quick charge, you now have the option to charge more than one. So this previously you could only do 0.1 or only do 0.4. You can now charge 0.1 and 0.4 in the same quick charge. It has the same drop down list with the TTP enhancement. And lastly, we've added the ability to attach documents to quick charges. Just a side note that when you do create a quick charge and you're still in the initial creation process, and you do wish to attach a document, the page will navigate you or redirect you temporarily to a different page to attach the file, and then it'll redirect you back to this page. And that is it. Those are the, I believe it's 9 major changes in workflow that 374 has brought along. Any last questions before we finish? Progress notes in the customer portal. This reduced the amount of manual communication books being completed. Currently, I don't think it's in our plans, and currently they can't see progress notes, but I can ask the release team and see if this can be included, since we've already had a few people mention it. It seems it could be useful. So another question, sorry, but Vanessa was, is employee utilization based on hours of support provided to customers or against the rostered hours? It's against rostered hours. Question was asked, can we copy over case notes from a closed case file over to a new case file? This currently hasn't been implemented, but it is something that we are looking at to ensure that the full audit trail for case notes is being preserved across case file to case file. Amanda, you can ask your question if you want. While that question, I believe, is being typed up, there's another question about Thursday session. Thursday session is just going to be a repeat of what occurred during this session. So if you've understood everything in its entirety, there won't be any need for you to attend session on Thursday. This recording will be sent out alongside with the slides to be passed around to your teams if you wish. And any questions that were asked will be part of an FAQ that will be attached to the manuals and sent out as well. That being said, if there aren't any more questions, so I'm just waiting for Amanda's. That will conclude this session training. Thank you for all coming. Hopefully it will help smoothing transition from 373 to 374. Any feedbacks or complaints that you may have, please send it through just to ensure a smoother transition in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.